Hello and welcome to the Online Educators Forum. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Lindsay Andreolli-Comstock, and today we are talking about the Great Migration, the mammoth global shift to online learning for traditional brick and mortar institutions. And to help us understand the realities of how one institution made that shift, I am joined by Reverend Erica Knisely from Austin Seminary today. Erica, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Erica, tell our viewers a little bit more about your role at Austin Seminary.
Sure. I serve as the Director of Educational Design for Education Beyond the Walls at Austin Seminary, and that's our lifelong learning department. I oversee a lot of our workshops and cohort programs. We've got actually a 5-member team, and I'm one person on that team.
Okay. You know, in early 2020, when it was clear that the COVID-19 virus was going to be a whole lot more than just a flu, I think most of us were just stunned by what was occurring. And maybe in some respects, there was a lot of disbelief about what was happening and how we should respond. Erica, what was the initial reaction of your department when you learned that students would not be able to meet face-to-face any longer?
Right, that was a big shock for everybody. And we started working from home in early March. And, I think we thought, okay, maybe this will be a month or two. And then it slowly dawned on us that, oh no, it's going to be a much bigger deal than that.
Right.
And maybe we need to just shift all of the rest of 2020,
Wow.
and then 2021 programming to something different, because at that point, most of our programming was in person, workshops and offerings.
Was the inclination to go online immediately, or were there other ideas being tossed around?
Well, it was really to take a pause and look at what we had on the schedule, and if those things could be transformed to being online offerings, and if they really just wouldn't work that way based on what we could surmise at the time. One of our big conferences was something called Creativity and Hope in the Face of Trauma. And we've been planning that for 2 years. It was sort of my pet project. I was really attached to it. And we did that in cooperation with our University of Texas School of Social Work. And that was we had different theologians coming in for that. And we had counselors and social workers. I had a dancer set up to do dance and breathing and meditation and all sorts of really interesting creative things. And then we realized it wasn't going to be possible in person, but we thought, isn't that interesting timing that we were going to talk about trauma and healing from trauma? And now we're in the midst of this pandemic where we're all experiencing some aspect of collective trauma. And, at that point, we're also seeing a lot of videos of racial trauma that were happening in the culture. And so with that one, what we decided to do was get together all of the speakers, have a call and say, what do you all think? Can we do this? Can we move this online? And the consensus was, this is really important. This is a really important topic, but we need to do it differently. We obviously we couldn't meet in person, but we couldn't just transform a one-day, all-day conference into a one-day, all-day on Zoom. That wasn't going to work. So we had some really wonderful minds around the table, and we thought about, well, what do people need right now? And these are people who deal with trauma and who are counselors. So they were the perfect people. We thought, little bites of presentation, practices that we could lead on Zoom for like really simple breathing, really simple movement. We found ways to bring in a spoken word poet to bring some creativity to this. Our dancer filmed her dance ahead of time that we showed to folks. We had small group breakout sessions. We recruited people to lead those so we wouldn't lose the kind of interaction that you get kind of in between sessions or around tables, and spread it out over, I think, 3 or 4 days, actually. And so it was a lot. It was a lot of pivoting. We were all exhausted by the end, but I think it was a really good first foray into transforming something to be online that felt important at the moment.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible that the very first program that you were shifting was something so right for the culture and the environment in that time. That's really incredible. But it sounds like that you didn't grab onto the anxiety that a lot of people felt to just kind of toss everything online. I think a lot of institutions were paralyzed by all of the changes that are occurring and the new safety protocols. And the paralysis meant that the shift to online learning was chaotic. But what I'm hearing from you is a sense of organization and calm and centering. What other strategic steps did your department take with other programs to make the shift to online intentional for your faculty and students?
Well, a lot of conversation amongst our team about what we thought was possible. I mean, I think we were also very tuned into the fact that everyone, every one of us was stressed. Multiple ones of us had small children at home who were now doing virtual school. So we thought about what can we actually handle? What can we
Mhm.
let go of? And we had consultations with the people we had lined up. Some people just didn't feel comfortable doing their presentation online. They're like, I don't like to teach online. I don't want to do this online. And so we followed that lead as well. I would say probably 50% of things got canceled that were on the table at that point. And then as we kind of progressed, we actually picked up new things and new forms. Especially as we get into 2021 and we're not back in person yet. And still in 2022, we're having those questions. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So a little bit of canceling and new iterations of things, and then also hybrid kind of new evolution and new iterations of things that were previously planned. So it sounds like a lot of flexibility
Mhm.
was part of that. In what ways did your role evolve? In what ways did you have to be flexible in order to be a leader, a director in this arena?
Yes. Well, I mean, our team really has sort of a culture of flexibility, adaptability. We've talked since I've been there, and I think I've been there about 7 years, about rapid cycle prototyping. We've done design centered research. We're a creative, tinkering, experimental kind of group, and we're okay with failure and risk, at least to some extent. So I think that was already part of the water I was swimming in.
Mm.
And I also just love learning new things and new technology. So I became I still think this is funny. I became the Zoom online learning expert for the whole seminary in terms of
Wow.
not the faculty who were teaching like on Bright Space or something like that, but people would look to me like, "How do you do Zoom well?" I was like,
Mm.
"Okay, sure, I'll tell you what I know." And I learned film editing. I
Wow.
learned, yeah, I learned Canva and how to do like slides to make videos look better, and I kind of learned this on the fly, but I really thrive in that. Some folks find it very frustrating, so I think it's a personality thing. And interestingly, we were kind of set up well because before the pandemic, we started working with a consulting firm that was helping us create a new like kind of online learning light community. It's a mighty network, which it combines like a Facebook aspect of a news feed and commenting abilities and posts with courses and groups where you can actually put in modules and videos and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
we were starting to develop that, and they were also there at the beginning, kind of coaching us on how to do good online hospitality and engagement. So, and my VP was in a group of other you know lifelong learning leaders, seminary leaders, talking about what have you tried that's worked online. So we were always kind of sharing different techniques and strategies. But my role just sort of evolved to designing online learning and figuring out what works well, and how do you actually do community work, and how do you connect with people, and how long can you listen to somebody online, and how do you
Right.
do groups well. So um, yeah, I became sort of an online design slash, all sorts of other things like graphics person for our team.
Right. Wow. It sounds like a mix of your own entrepreneurism and your own, desire and self-motivation to learn these new things, but also this kind of collective whereby people are sharing best practices and there's not really a subject matter expert in all of this. We're all kind of finding our way together, but maybe a sense of collectively wanting to succeed and maybe getting rid of some of our competitivism so that we can all thrive. It sounds like those two mixtures together made for a smooth transition for you all, as much was as possible.
Yeah, I think so. And another interesting thing that happened, because somehow I became the de facto online engagement expert for the seminary on on Zoom. And so other departments would ask me questions. And in our big midwinters conference that is run by our institutional advancement office had to go online. I became involved in that. I did that again this year. And it opened up sort of cross-pollination between departments that previously were more siloed. So I think that was a really nice opportunity.
Mm. Well, that leads me to my next question. We talk about how disruption is one of those moments when we start to see true character emerge, but it's also where innovation thrives. So I was going to ask you, what has surprised you about your staff and your lifelong learners during this transition period? What kind of emerged that you didn't expect?
Well, we all did it. I mean, I think we really have some very resilient folks who just adapted because we had to. I remember like our IT department and the giant shift they made to get everybody on like Microsoft Teams so we could all work from home and communicate with one another. And everybody in my team learning how to do online and do Zoom and do breakout rooms and all of this. And I think we had tried some things online before. Something I had called Webinar Wednesdays, which seems so antiquated now. But it was a way to connect our faculty and some of the things they're interested in, to do kind of a lunchtime webinar so that alumni and folks could get online and hear about their latest insights and learnings. And it was really poorly attended.
Mm.
And some of our faculty were really comfortable teaching online because they had other seminaries, but most of them felt it was very awkward for them. It just was not something they were used to.
Right.
And then, I don't think maybe a lot of our audience was used to doing Zoom or felt comfortable with that. But, the entire world in many
All moved online.
all moved online, all the way up to 90-year-old grandparents know how to do Zoom now. So it's
Right.
like it expanded this whole audience now that I think people are like, okay, I can do that. So I think what's kind of fun about that is we can reach more people. So one of our programs it was a cohort-based program. It's an 18-month cohort program for pastors, and they're learning about public theology and kind of developing confidence about leading more in public and leading their congregations on issues. And we started in October 2019, and we were supposed to meet 7 times, go to DC on a big trip. And then our last meeting was in February of 2020. And so, after that, March, April, we got online with them a couple times to do a check-in, then realized, okay, we're going to not be able to meet for a long time, to say like, this isn't really what you signed up for.
Right.
I want to continue to do this. And all of them were like, yes, we need this. We need each other. We want to do this. We want to get online. I mean, we shortened everything in terms of, we did 2 hours every month, but it lengthened the whole process. But they wanted to do it. And they found it valuable. And it sort of, that community had already been built, and that sort of buoyed them with the stress that pastors particularly faced during the pandemic. So I was surprised by that, by their willingness, but I think it was a lifeline for a lot of people.
Yeah, it sounds like they kind of wanted to shift with you. So
Mm-hmm.
as you were learning, they wanted to learn with you. And that's just community-based learning, that kind of collective knowledge exchange, I think is really priceless. You mentioned a couple of times as we've talked, Erica, about shortening things. What was your basis, your understanding, your reason and rationale for often shortening things?
Really, and I can't remember who we heard this from early on, but with kind of adult learning theory in mind, and like how long can people actually listen to something and actually hear it and take it in before they need to process, and how important it is for adults to have time to process with each other and make practical connections to what they're hearing, just sort of being that foundational concept. But like I'd heard someone say, well, when you go online, you need to shorten that like lecture time to like at least a third.
Mhm.
And I found that to be true because we did both, where we'd have in different things we've done where we have someone come in and often they would talk longer than we had asked them to talk. And there was always the feedback like, I just can't take that in. It's just too much talking. I want to talk to my peers.
Mm.
Um, I appreciate hearing from experts and this knowledge, but really what I need to do is learn with the other people around the table.
Right.
And I think we all felt that like, Zoom fatigue. And so we were really
Right.
trying to think about, with the stress, when we're like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're at this bottom tier, like what can we actually handle?
Right.
And, how can this actually be refreshing for our souls? And then just thinking about adults and really anyone in terms of, how learning happens.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I've heard that as well, and different iterations of online programming that I've been involved with as well, that less is more when it comes to online, and finding creative ways to continue to help the learner learn, but that less is more when it comes to some chunks of information so that people can process, because as with that screen in between us, we now have different forms and ways of processing. I think that's wonderful advice. Okay, so as we close, what other advice do you have? Anybody running a program like yours, somebody that feels like they're floundering in online education, or maybe people after nearly 3 years are finally ready to make the shift? What other pieces of advice, big or small, do you have for people in the same boat that you were in a couple of years ago?
Well, I think what's really useful is to look around and see what's working well among sister institutions or other things. Like, what would you want to do? I mean, what would you have the tolerance for? Sometimes we don't ask ourselves that question. We just design things, but we don't think about who's going to be learning it or how we would even respond. Like we've all now done a lot of online things. Like what things went well for us, what kept our attention. And I think, we certainly approach this with an attitude or an ethic of abundance over scarcity. We're not, there's a lot of fish, there's a lot of people to learn. I mean, we're not in competition with our sister institutions. We want to learn from them
Mhm.
and we want to all get better, because really our mission focus, it's not about or shouldn't be about us. It's about helping ministerial leaders, pastors, congregations learn for the good of everyone. So why wouldn't we all want to be at our best and kind of help each other out and say, hey, we tried this didn't work for us, this is what I would do differently, or hey, this person's doing this really well. I mean, we've partnered with a sister institution to use their online modules that we actually recruit our own facilitators to do. So we're trying to find other ways to do partnership and leverage content that's already good and not recreate it.
I love that. Rather than recreating the wheel, let's just make the wheel roll better. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
wonderful lived experience advice. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, Erica, how do we get in contact with you?
We're on social media. We've got Instagram at EBWAPTS. I'm happy to talk with folks. I've already talked to some folks who are new to the lifelong learning field. I'm also on the Association for Leaders in Lifelong Learning for Ministry, and that's really a great place to make connections with other folks and have these conversations and kind of cross-pollinate. So, and I think any of my team members would be happy to share that. So.
That's wonderful. Well, I love the spirit that Austin Seminary is sharing, this kind of collective effort to do online learning well. And thank you so much for your time, Erica. This has been wonderful. Folks, that's our show for today. And this is the Online Educators Forum. See you next time.